2Coast Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Kumont. Today we have a great episode ahead of us. Talked about the standings and some of the big and impactful games from last week. Went on a handful of tangents and closed out with a preview of what December will entail for us while these teams go on break. Hope you enjoy. Short little intro music and then we'll get right into it. Alright, like we said in the intro, we're going to tackle some standings. Let's go coast to coast. Starting in the West Coast, VIU takes care of business against Camosun to maintain that top spot, going 2-0. Douglas College didn't play this week, it being their bye week. Capilano, huge wins. Big blowout win against Columbia Bible College to start the weekend, and then really took care of business in the second game. Much closer, better, and frankly a better performance from Columbia Bible College. But Capilano taking care of business at home, going 2-0, and cementing themselves in that tied for second place at 9-3. Langara got crucial home wins against Okanagan, keeping their playoff dreams alive. I think without those wins, it's very hard to get wins in the Pac West. There's only 7 teams. And I think with how dominant the top 4 have been, you need to get wins against. If you're Camosun, it's Langara and Okanagan. If you're Langara, Camosun, Okanagan, and Okanagan, Langara and Camosun. And so 3-9 records for Camosun and Langara respectively, Okanagan 0-12. The dream's not dead for Okanagan, but they have to win a lot of games. Top 6 go to playoffs, so if you're Langara Camosun, this is where you want to be, scraping for wins. I think for both these squads, they probably had expected themselves to potentially be a little higher coming into the season, but 3-9 heading into the winter semester isn't too bad. We're going to quickly go into Alberta. Quickly is not the right word. We're going into Alberta. North Division reigns supreme. Top 4 schools, Concordia, NAIT, Augustana, and the King's University clinch up. 9-1, 9-2, 9-0, 7-1 respectively. Those are the best teams in Alberta. Week in, week out, they have been so. 4 combined losses amongst those schools. Not too much you get, and I think 2 of those losses are coming off of playing against each other, with NAIT and TKU going 1-1. Respectively. So all in all, pretty good. St. Mary's got a critical win, or pair of wins, to get themselves back to above 500 for the first time in all of November. If we recall to my ratings, I had St. Mary's as one of the best schools for the first 3 weeks or so, even though the record didn't reflect that. When they win big. So really happy to see them get back into the winning column and above 500. As we go into Ontario, Loyalist picks up 2 wins to continue its undefeated streak with a 74-39 road win against Durham and a 97-74 home win against George Brown. Those are great numbers. Mohawk went on the road against Conestoga for an 81-38 win to extend their undefeated season. I do think it's a bit of a travesty, scheduling-wise, that because these programs are in different divisions, they won't play against each other until potentially the playoffs, which I think is a shame, because they are 2 of the best teams. We did see, not this last week, but the week prior, big game where we had undefeated Humber play Mohawk at Humber, and that was a really cool game, and really special, and I think any opportunity we get to see really good schools go against each other, we all benefit. So a bit of a shame that these 2 programs potentially won't play at all. I think it's a shame because they've been not only the best. We'll talk about this a little bit later when I talk about some of the other undefeated teams, but they have really demonstrated high levels of efficiency that are kind of unreplicated elsewhere across the country. Other big wins in Ontario, St. Clair had themselves a weekend. going 79-77 home win against Humber, previously mentioned undefeated team. And then on Saturday, that was on Saturday, and on Sunday, they got a big win against Sheridan, going 64-61. Sheridan, though record-wise not impressive. New coach, if I'm not mistaken, and an exciting program that is kind of getting into their own. So though Sheridan doesn't necessarily have the record, that's a good win for St. Clair. Fanshawe also goes 2-0 with wins against Niagara and Redeemer, and Seneca gets a good win against Algonquin in Algonquin, 57-52. Watch that game live. A really fun game. I think Algonquin's not had the season that they had last year. Seneca, I think, is a better team than last year. I don't remember their record this time last year, but I really like this squad. They have to hit free throws, but otherwise, what a really fun squad to watch in Seneca. Moving into the RSEQ, Saint Jean maintains their undefeated season with a win against St. Lambert. Vanier gets an important win against Lennoxville in Lennoxville, and then St. Lambert does bounce back with a win against Dawson, who themselves had a big win against Trois-Rivières earlier that week. I think that was like an 82-something, 30-something win at Trois-Rivières, so that's pretty good. Good for Dawson, going 1-1 on the week. Exciting games to go back, honestly. Saint Jean, that game against St. Lambert was fun, and then the Vanier-Lennoxville game, I really enjoyed that. Going into the ACAA, Mount St. Vincent, they also continue their undefeated streak with a win over Crandall. Holland gets the road victory over King's College. And then a kind of fun situation, St. Thomas rounded out the weekend with all three road teams getting the victory with a 69-48 win over UNBSJ to cap off the weekend. I'd say all in all, this past week felt like the rich got richer. Whether that be in the West, where top teams got wins, or the higher seeds got wins, that being VIU and Langara over Okanagan. We look in Alberta and big wins for those top schools, and then even in Quebec, Saint Jean gets a win, Saint Foy gets a win. On Ontario, we see some big wins there. There were some upsets, notable upsets: Capilano over CPC, and then St. Clair getting the win over Humber. But in terms of like surprising victories, I think middle of the pack teams beat other middle of the pack teams, and then outside of our three upsets, I felt like heavy favorites either won big or just flat out won. So an exciting weekend. I am curious to see if going into the next semester, with the whole month off, what some of these programs can do, because that's quite a bit of time. Obviously, with exams, the holidays. I know from my own experience that, especially for young players, that first big break is consequential, often in the negative. It's tough to get practice time, to exercise, the opportunity for sweets and foods and all that kind of stuff is a challenge. But I am really excited from like a technical standpoint to see what some of these coaches do in terms of prep, because I do think there's quite a bit to be learned from the first semester of basketball, and I think that I really want to see how these teams adapt. I think there's some really smart coaches that have already demonstrated their game-to-game adaptations. I think the Pac West format really lends itself to really smart coaches, maybe not in terms of recruiting, but definitely in terms of the X's and O's. If you can get your teams to adapt from game to game with the doubleheader situation that they got going on, we play the same team twice, I think that's a huge advantage. A team I really think, and a coaching staff, I think that does that really well. Just want to highlight this right now, kind of off on a tangent, is Langara and Coach Adriano. I really love how they handle their back-to-backs. I feel like regardless what happens in the first game, that second game, they come up with adjustments and they pick something. I think one that really sticks in my mind is actually opening weekend. They play at Columbia Bible College, get blown out of the gym. They played really good for 3 quarters. The wheels fell off in the fourth. But then the next day, they're at home hosting Columbia Bible College, and they decide to full court press man to man on Tomiko for Columbia Bible College, the starting point guard, and arguably the best player, if not one of the two best players. Their whole offense runs through her, and they just face checked her, denied her the ball. She still ended up with like 18 points, but in terms of the final score, I think it was within 12. And it really hampered that Columbia Bible College offense, where they could just never get into rhythm. That really sticks in my mind. There's a couple other games too that come to mind. I think, with the exception of Camosun that weekend, where they finally get their first win, I think they really, it's emotional. It's tough to come in with the same fight the next day, especially with how emotional that first win of the season is. But I really liked how they adapted against some of these other teams as well in their back-to-backs. I think Douglas College does a really good job of this as well. Their coach has been there for forever, and I think that they handle the back-to-backs particularly well. When we look, elsewhere, there's some other schools I think come up with some interesting game plans, and I hope we see some more creative stuff coming into the new year. Loyalist is another team that I think their game planning is really interesting. I hope to see more of that from them, but also hopefully see some teams take what they've done. Kind of getting back to these undefeated teams and these records. We've got 5 teams that are undefeated still across the country. And I think that's really impressive. A lot of the teams have played 9 to 12 games. That's kind of our range where we're at. And for us to have 5 squads that are still undefeated is pretty impressive. That being Augustana, Mohawk, Loyalist, Saint Jean, and Mount St. Vincent. I think wildly impressive. And I think what's kind of interesting is there are some trends of these schools, but I think that it's how different these squads play, and not even so much how they play, but just sort of like how they're getting their wins. We look at like Mohawk and Loyalist to an extent are hyper efficient. They make their shots. I think how Mohawk forces on defense, they're much more aggressive. I think at forcing the offense to do something when they're on defense. Whereas I feel like Loyalist on defense is really good at suffocating and just sort of cutting off options, and then on offense, they just attack the basket. There's very little indecisiveness. I think that's the biggest trend, I think, amongst all 5 of these schools, is a lack of indecisiveness. There's a lot of things that these schools do differently in terms of defensive schemes and priorities and offensive efficiency and rebounding. Like I think Augustana's the best rebounder of the 5, and they do a really good job of not turning the ball over. Whereas some of these schools like Saint Jean, they're a Gatling gun. Their possessions are insane. I think they have like 75 more possessions than their next opponent. Like they shoot the ball an incredible amount of times. They get a lot of opportunities. They're plus 25 in points per game against their opponents. But I think decisiveness is probably the biggest unifier of these 5 squads. I think that if your team's trying to compete for the national title or the conference title, I think becoming more decisive is critical. And actually something I think that I hope some of these coaches take away for the first half of the season and see what these squads are doing really well. And that is that decisiveness. I was doing some prep for some of our episodes during the break, and I was rewatching Loyalist Centennial, which was Loyalist's opening game of the season. It was at Centennial, and I was really impressed with um, the lack of, I don't know, like probing offense. Like it was an offense where like each pass was then immediately turned into another pass or attack the basket or the shot goes up. Like it just there was no dead air, no dead space, no like trying to figure out. It's like no, I'm going, and I don't think it was an opening game, so a little rusty, and the percentages aren't great. Um, but I really liked the mindset, and I think that's really fascinating, um, both in terms of like how these teams operate, but also I think that like it kind of bucks sort of a larger trend of basketball across the board, and I don't want to get too large in that, but I do think that kind of going off on a little tangent here, but I think that like the concept of having a bag is overrated, and I really like these teams that just like they're not trying to be too fancy with it or too cute. They're just going, um, and it's not always the prettiest, but sometimes it is. Like honestly, like I was rewatching, maybe it was from last week, a game last week that still sticks in my mind was Saint Jean versus Saint Foy, and both those teams very decisive, just go like impressive Euro steps, the spin moves, attacking the basket. Like it wasn't ugly basketball, but I wouldn't say anyone was like deep in their bag. And I think that's I think especially this level, at the CCAA level, where these are talented athletes. But I just think that like it's important to not overcomplicate things. I think the disparity of talent at times can be really apparent, and so I think just simplifying and being aggressive, being decisive is really important. I think even in these squads that don't have huge wins, again thinking back to last week or the week prior when Red Deer, Poly, and St. Mary's had those back-to-back games, one at Red Deer and then the next at St. Mary's. I'm thinking back to like Red Deer, like in that first game where they do beat St. Mary's, how like that game's only a win for them because they shot the ball like immediately. There was no hesitation from the 3-point line. Like ball gets swung, shot goes up. There's no like, oh, pump fake, jab. Let me see what I got here. No, I caught the ball, shot goes up, and I think that's how you get wins. I think with Trois Rivières last week, or I guess 2 weeks at this point now, when they got their first win of the season as well, they come back and scored 9 points in the last 2 or 3 minutes from three, and all of those were decisive shots. There's no hesitation; they just pull up. So I hope to see more of that, and I think that's how these teams get wins. And we'll see more. We'll see it as the season goes on. I think that like the teams that are winning are the more decisive squads, and then the squads that have the more probing offenses, or maybe pass, a little indecisive. I think those schools and squads are gonna struggle, especially late down the stretch. Kind of want to touch on our next topic here. Sorry. Before I get into that, just looking over my notes really quick. Just wanted to note that it is uncommon for undefeated teams to make it all the way through the playoffs unscathed. I am curious to see how many of these squads do it. I did give a hot take / prediction in episode 1 that I thought Saint Jean was going to win the national title, go undefeated the whole way. I still feel that way, especially with how they're playing. They had some injuries during the Saint Foy game, and still took care of business next week. Now they have a break. I think I still like my odds. Saint Jean versus the Field. I still like those odds. I will say how Mohawk is playing specifically does make that prediction a little nervous for me. as that's a squad that just is elite, and would not be too surprised either if that team makes it to nationals undefeated. That team's playing just incredible basketball. All right, moving on to our next subject. I do want to shout out some broadcasts. It's kind of a topic I want to talk about since the beginning of starting this podcast, but even well before, and kind of the motivator for me to start a podcast was the disparity of broadcasts. I really enjoy watching basketball. It is easier to watch basketball when the production is good, fine, and it's not doesn't take much, like audio and a commentator and maybe a graphic here and there, whether that's like the halftime graphic or something, just anything. I think that they're speaking about the Pac West because it's what I've watched historically the most. There are a couple programs that just it's just a guy with a tripod. And don't get me wrong, tripod guy does a great job, but Douglas College does not have any production. I think it's a travesty because that's a really good team. There's nothing going on there. Capilano is the same. I really like Capilano's gym as well. Just like it's a pleasant looking gym. No production. I think that's really tough. Camosun is hit or miss. VIU is hit or miss. They're not consistent. Langara has former men's coach Paul Eberhardt, who, when he is there, does a really good job. And I'm a little biased as being one of his former players, but it's not always there, or sometimes delayed with traffic or whatever. But when he's there, does give incredible insight. And so, and Columbia Bible College also doesn't. So the Pac West, just in general, kind of falls short on the commentary production side of things. Thank goodness the camera quality is good, and at least that there is audio, but is not always the most enjoyable viewing experience. I think that is really tough, and I think if you look at those videos, it kind of reflects. I think 200 people on average to 300 people watch those games on YouTube, whereas we go look at Ontario games, and there's at least 400 people. You go look at the games in the Maritimes, and there's at least 400 views to 500 views on those videos. Even the Quebec ones, 400 or 500 views. So I know it's not much, 200 to 500 or whatever, but that's double. So that's double the eyeballs on these games, and the production value is significantly better. Not all across the board, but I would say in general, at least one commentator. But for a lot of these schools, there are multiple commentators, which I think just one commentator is excellent. Two commentators just blows the roof off. Just the ability to listen to two people have a conversation about the game, the players. I mean, I was watching a game that sticks in my mind is I think week 1 or week 2 of the ACAA. Mount Allison's commentary. I forget who their broadcaster was, but he's the person who does the lacrosse and the basketball and the baseball and does all and the volleyball and does all the sports. And he was only able to do the one game, the one broadcast before I think transitioning back to doing the football seasonal or whatever it was. Incredible broadcast. They were answering YouTube questions. They were interacting with the chat on YouTube. And they had graphics and sponsors. I just, an incredible broadcast. And I made me a little envious that there are 54 teams, 57 if you include the 3 in Manitoba, and there may be 15 to 20 schools that have a serious broadcast. There are some from this last week that I would love to highlight. And maybe this will be a continual thing, but I just wanted to highlight 4 schools. Algonquin is, I think, the gold standard. I have loved their broadcasts. I think, go back to their Halloween broadcast, or their broadcast the week of Halloween. I forget who Algonquin was playing. Hilarious broadcast. One of the commentators, full face paint. Um, they had like a pregame show, a halftime show. It was awesome, and I think that they continued home game after home game, really step up the bar. Multiple camera angles, replays, color commentary, play-by-play, perfection. VIU this last week, loved the broadcast. I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that it was like Rogers TV, but regardless, it was an awesome broadcast. Replays, graphics, awesome. King's College, really liked that broadcast. I forget who they played, but it was a great broadcast. Really enjoyed that. And then Medicine Hat, the double commentators, two students of various sports background. I think one was a soccer player, one was a basketball player, and loved the banter and the candor. I don't know. They were talking about how like the court is like close to the wall on one side, and like they're surprised no one has like fallen out the door or whatever. Awesome stuff. Just like gives a real personality to the broadcast, and at least for me, makes it a more enjoyable process. In a way to, I don't know, if I'm going to spend 2 hours watching a game, I think it is more enjoyable when there is any broadcast, any production elements to it. I definitely, especially with me trying to watch all 54 teams, 57 teams, I do, speed through at 2x or 1.5 times speed any of those broadcasts that have no sound, have no commentary or any degree of broadcast. I'm thinking of some of the Albertan teams that I think Lakeland. I don't know if every game they haven't had a broadcast, but they've had a couple where I'm just like, well, I guess I'm watching this at 2 times speed. Olds College, especially like sticks in my mind, and who else? I can't think of anyone else in Alberta, but there's a few. I mean, all the Pac West functionally don't have a real broadcaster, and that's just way too bad. So I hope that going forward with, as the sport grows and as more people watch and go to these games, that these schools commit to having real broadcasts, and I don't see why not. I think most, if not all, these institutions have journalism or broadcast degrees or courses or students who are interested. Like I can't fathom that there are not people who would happily broadcast these games and do color commentary. I mean, the game I got on in the background is the Vanier versus Lennoxville at Lennoxville game, and the broadcaster, I'm blanking on his name, hilarious. He's just doing it by himself. He doesn't know all the players' names. Doesn't matter. He brings the energy, and it's an entertaining broadcast. Not only just because the basketball's great, but because the person who is talking about it cares about the game itself, and cares about the school. So I hope to see more. I think it is disappointing as someone who is a Pac West homer. It is really disappointing that the majority of our schools, if not all but one program, don't have a regular broadcast production of any sort. Charlotte Langara, not getting wins this season, but definitely, succeeding at one thing. All right. So I think that's enough on that. I don't know. I feel really passionate about the broadcasts, and as someone who chooses, I don't have to, but I choose to watch all these games. It makes a huge difference. All right, moving into our last little segment. We'll do some final thoughts. there's only a handful of games left for the rest of this year before the new year. Makes me a little sad, and it's part of the reason why I didn't do a stats update or a like power ranking update, because there are like 5 or 7 games left. I felt like it was not necessarily worthwhile talking about or updating my math until getting those games in, especially because there's so few. If there were, 12 to 15 more games, then I definitely would have, busted out the calculator and produced a ranking. But I just felt like because there were so few games remaining, that wait the extra week, get all the data, and then really parse through it, give my first half of the season ratings / rankings. So really excited about next week's episode. Actually, the next months. I'm really excited about what I have planned for December. Kind of touching on next week, we're going to get into a big recap, talk about notable teams, our ratings, like I mentioned, power rankings, etc. Talk about, I've got this plan for like some awards, honor roll kind of situation. Players who I want to highlight some players who I think have played exceptional through the first half, and not just in terms of like stat leaders, but there's some aspects of basketball I really care about. Make your shots, percentages, that kind of stuff, and that's what our honor roll awards are going to be. I'm going to highlight some players that hit some shooting percentages that thresholds I think really matter and lead to winning basketball. And some other fun awards, that kind of stuff. We'll take a little check-in with where our belts are for our various conference belts. It'll be a good episode. And then moving into the rest of December, recap time. I don't know quite yet how I'll break it down. We might get some bonus episodes through the month of December, but my game plan is to revisit all 54 teams and do like a fall semester recap for all 54 teams, highs, lows, things I really enjoyed, focusing more on the positives. I think, especially if we have quite a few undefeated teams, we do have 4 or 5 teams with 0 wins, and so I tend to want to focus more on the positives. I think with the best teams, I definitely want to be more critical because those are the teams that are going to be competing at the end of the season for things. But for our teams that don't have the wins, I definitely want to focus more on the positives because those are real opportunities for programs to build for the future. Not that those teams that are winning now can't also be building for the future. I mean, we look at VIU and how that's a program that just not only do they win or compete for winning year in, year out, but they also continually build. They have a relatively young roster. They have some key veterans, but a relatively young roster, top of the table. We look at Douglas College, since COVID, is the 4 seed perennially, like a top 4 team perennially. So I think that I want to focus on those teams that are struggling, what they're doing well, what do I like, what I see that I see, and focus less on the negative because I think that's really apparent. I think any team that is sub 500, we could probably chalk it up to turns the ball over too much, doesn't hit their shots, defensive lapses, and maybe a lack of talent or athleticism in comparison to their opponents. Not particularly interesting. I'd rather focus on things that they did well, things that they did good, because I think that there are teams that, even though they don't have wins or have very few wins, do stuff that I like, and I want to focus on that and highlight that. And also in hopes that I'd love to be able to talk to these players and teams in the future, and because there are things that are fascinating about their style of play or schemes and just there's so much that's so interesting that I want to focus on positive there. So I think that's where we're going to end up today. A bit quicker the episode. We're going to figure out episode lengths. Somewhere in that 30 to 45 minute window is kind of where I like to be. So thank you so much for watching the Coast to Coast Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Kumont. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Follow us on Instagram for updates for when future episodes drop. And thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.